Welcome to the Whiskey Vault. I'm Daniel Whittington, Chancellor of Wizard Academy and Whiskey Marketing School. And today we're going to talk about worm tubs in Scottish whiskey production. Well, whiskey production in general. A worm tub. This is a question asked by Will Sharp 9258. Hey Daniel, you mentioned Rosebank, who not only triple distills but also uses worm tubs. Could you explain the impact of worm tub condensers on a spirit and why you may or may not want to use them? Thanks. Yes, I can. A worm tub is when you take a tub and you fill it with earthworms and then you pour whiskey through it, sort of like the Lincoln County process in Tennessee, and then you catch the whiskey at the other end, and that's how they make scotch. Most people don't know that. It's not how it is. It's not what it is. Okay. If you really want a great resource on this, there's an article written by Lucy Brittner, who wrote about worm tubs, and she did a great job, or they did a great job. But real quick, recap on production. You've got grain, you mash it, make a porridge, you ferment it with yeast, you make a beer or a wash, and then you clean it, you make a wort, and then you distill it once to make a stripping run. You distill it a second time and to make heart cuts, right? Well, as you are wanting to collect the final product off of the pot still distillation, you have to heat something up, create vapors, and then those vapors go up through a line arm, and then they need to be condensed back into a liquid. You condense them back into a liquid by cooling them down. And by cooling them down, what I mean is the pipe that the vapor is going through, you cool the pipe down, and the contact of the vapor with the cooling pipe condenses, just like a glass of iced tea on a summer day. It turns humidity in the air into liquid on the glass, right? And this is a condenser. And then that liquid comes out an opening and you collect it, and that's the whiskey spirit that you put into the barrel. Condensers change the flavor of the spirit. Now, by and large, the vast majority of modern distilleries use a shell and tube condenser, and what that just means is the pipe goes into this bigger container and water is pumped through, or coolant is pumped through this shell that the pipe goes through, and that contact condenses the spirit back and turns it back into a liquid. It's efficient, it's more compact, it's really easy to repair and or replace if something goes wrong. A worm tub is actually a throwback to the original, like if you go look at original moonshine stills, even in the US, not just Scotland, if you go look at a moonshiner exhibit in some museum, you're gonna see a pot still and a little line arm, and you're gonna see a tank with a loop of copper tubing kind of going around in a circle, and then a little pipe coming out the bottom. They would fill that with creek water, right? So they would run creek water into this tank and back out, and that creek water would cool the vapors as that pipe circled around. That's a worm tub. In Scotland, they did the same thing. Now, historically, what anyone will tell you, let's talk about the whiskey first, and then I'll tell you about how it impacts flavor. But hopefully you understand, a tub full of water with a tube going in a loop around into the water, that's a worm tub condenser, right? Shell and tube is pipe going through a cylindrical container that is cooling it as it comes out the other side. Now, how does it change the flavor of things? We'll tell you, and I'm going to drink Old Pulteney 12 because I love Old Pulteney 12, and also because they use worm tub condensers, if I'm not mistaken. So, the Pulteney distillery, Old Pulteney, is way the hell up on the northern tip of Scotland, facing the North Sea on the east edge of the rounded tip, and it's just off the coasts of Orkney Islands. It's way up there. Their barrel warehouses are on the ocean, and so they talk about getting that sort of maritime impact. There are people who will tell you that pre-2018, it was a little bit of a different flavor than what we're getting now, but still I love everything that Old Pulteney makes. And So that's why I chose to review it. This is the classic 12 that you can just pick up when you pick up Old Pulteney. Right now, in the nose, as I picked it up, honey, pear, a little bit of brine, and a little bit of a sour malt funk. A little bit of vanilla. These guys are up on the Caithness coast. And this is bourbon cask. This is all bourbon. This one specifically, all bourbon barrels. And where's the proof? 40%. There you go. This is a nose that reminds me a little of Oban and a little, not as much as funky as Talisker or smoky as Talisker, but it's very kind of light mixed with salty. Salty is the wrong word. It's not salty, it's wispy. Okay, so the palate started as honey and then just sort of went and disappeared like a fire, like, I don't know, like alcohol evaporating off of your arm. It's like, ooh, it's wet. Ooh, it's dry. That was fast. I'm going to try that again. There's a slight salted caramel aftertaste, but there's not a lot to that. It's very effervescent. It's not very weighty, not heavy and meaty. Very approachable, easy drinking. I like the nose more than I like the palate, but it's a nice, very accessible Scotch. Sort of tiptoe into the flavors of Scotch without being dominated by smoke or anything like that. I could easily recommend this as a bourbon or an Irish gateway into Ireland Pulteney Scotch. Anyway, this is a perfect example that just because you use worm tubs does not mean your whiskey is heavy and meaty. So going back to the worm tub, there's a common idea that if you use worm tubs, the spirit is heavier and weightier. And if you use shell and tube, it can be lighter because it has more copper contact, right? Yeah, sort of. The answer is sort of, because what they mean by that is if the water you use in your worm tub is cold, then your vapor, instead of making this slower transition from vapor to liquid, and the longer a vapor contacts copper, the more chemicals sort of get absorbed by the copper, and you get a lighter spirit. The quicker you go from vapor to liquid, the more you hold on to all these compounds that end up with a heavier flavor. So if your worm tub uses cold water, then it goes from vapor straight to liquid really fast. And liquid doesn't interact with copper the same way that vapor interacts with copper. And so you get, even though it looks like by sheer mileage of how many inches of copper tubing there are, that you get more copper contact, actually what happens is it stops having a real interaction with the copper as soon as it turns to liquid at the same level it does as a vapor. And so you get less copper extraction or interaction because it's already a liquid very quickly. But you can change that by the temperature that you put into your worm tub. So you can put a warmer temperature, not warm, but like a warmer temperature water, warm relative to cold. And, but you know, remember these vapors are coming off at 170 Fahrenheit, 200 Fahrenheit. So all you got to do is cool it down to 80, 90, 100 water, and you're still cooling it. It's not that, it's lower than that, but it doesn't have to be ice water. And if the cooling vapor to liquid transition is slower, then you can actually get a lot of copper contact in that coil before it finally cools down enough to fully condense into a liquid. So you can actually run a worm tub with a lot of copper extraction if you know what you're doing. So it's not just worm tub is heavy, spirit, shell and tube isn't. Once again, it has to do with how you run your machines and how you choose your process. But I hope that helps you understand. It's the one follow-up I'll say is, why is it rare? It's rare because it takes a lot of space. That's why. And everything about whiskey production at a scale is about space and efficiency. And in the space that it takes to have giant worm tubs, you can do a lot of other things. If you do shell and tube, it takes way less space, and it's way more efficient, and it's way easier to repair and fix. So that's why you don't often see worm tubs. They're higher maintenance, they're harder to repair, they take up more space, but it's a very traditional way of doing whiskey, and some people really love that idea, and I get that. I hope that helps. Cheers to you, and I'm really glad you're here. If you like this worm tub of a channel, old school, can't think of anything else, but like and subscribe, it helps.